G'day, and welcome to SpearSafe, the National Spearfishing Safety Initiative. Check out the website and this great brochure for a few tips on how to spearfish safely. I'd like to introduce you now to Ron Taylor. Ron's a past Australian spearfishing champion who's been spearfishing for over 50 years.
I'm Ron Taylor. I first went into the underwater world in 1952 with mast, snorkel and fins, and I became fascinated. It wasn't long before I took up spearfishing, and of course no scuba. I was breath holding. I would recommend that you look at this DVD and understand that there are some potential problems in the ocean with breath holding, free diving, even speedboats buzzing around. And if you study this DVD, you'll get a good idea of how to stay out of trouble. But the most important thing is to build a safety factor into whatever you do into the ocean.
Spearfishing is a great fun sport, but it can be dangerous. Today we're going to go out and have a look at some of those dangers and how you can reduce the risks when you go spearfishing. I've got this great publication here, A Guide to Spearfishing in New South Wales, produced by the USFA. I highly recommend everyone get hold of a copy of this, and it will help you remember some of those dangers and also some of the other great fun aspects of spearfishing. Breath hold spearfishing involves you leaving the surface with one breath of air, going down, trying to shoot a fish or grab a lobster, come back to the surface on that same breath of air. So by its nature, you can run short of oxygen. Something that kills a lot of divers each year is blackout. We've got some footage that we're going to show you. It really runs through all the ins and outs of diver blackout. It's very important that you dive conservatively, well within your limits. I try never to push myself more than about 50% of my capability and very, very rarely dive over a minute. If you dive conservatively, you'll be a lot safer. Remember, there's no second chances.
Here's the whole point about blackouts. You don't think it could happen to you? You better think again.
I remember just thinking I'm pretty close to the surface, I better kick pretty hard, and then I just remember dreaming after I started kicking.
Kicking up to the surface, and I think somewhere between 5-10 seconds, and last thing I remember,
sort of just seeing a light, just, you know, like a little blank light.
What do you remember about that particular dive?
I remember diving down, and it was a really big ledge, a nice ledge, with a lot of relief. And I dove down, and I just saw a big Jewfish down there. Then I saw more and more, and I was just sitting down there. And they were feeding on little fish, so I was just mesmerized. And I remember being down there and being like, I've been down here pretty long, I better go up. I don't really have to breathe yet, but I better head up. And on the way up, I just remember kicking really hard and then dreaming.
I was breathing up and I was about to dive down, and I saw a gun sinking down to the bottom with nobody attached to it. And then when I looked over, and then Mike was like face down in the water, limp, just not moving. So then I knew he blacked out.
So what did you do then?
I swam over to him, I took his mask off his face and kind of like propped him up out of the water just so he'd be able to breathe. And then like I heard him gargling and everything, so it was almost like a Heimlich I did, and water came out. I did that like about 2 times, and then he finally regained consciousness.
Mike, what?
And
dude,
it was like he woke up from a
blacked
dream.
out, bro.
It was like if you woke somebody up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and they're like, "What are you doing? Why are you doing this to me?" Just he didn't have a clue what was going on.
What's the first thing you thought when you woke up?
I just remember Keegan screaming at my name, and I woke up hearing my name being screamed. And then I remember him yelling at Kyle and Clint to go get the boat. And then I swam, the boat pulled up, I swam back over there and hopped up on the boat, and we weren't really sure what to do. Like they were thinking about going to another dive spot, and then they called people and they said to get me to the emergency room, so we ran in as fast as we could.
So David, what was the day like?
Speared a lot of fish, and it was pretty fun too. You know, we
just us guys. We had a lot of fun, talking and stuff. It was the bottom, and that was so easy, It really wasn't much different than, diving on a 30-foot reef. It was, just you swim down and you're already there, and it was just no challenge. And so I thought, that we gotta try something a little bit harder than that.
The anchor was probably about 80 feet, and we were 90 feet of water. So we were on the way down. I saw the anchor, and I saw the bottom, and it's right there. So we got to touch the bottom. We just might as well while we're down this deep. And I touched it, and David was right behind me, and he touched the bottom. And then that's when we gave each other a thumbs up, and we
started heading back up to the surface. And I remember sort of spinning around while I was swimming up to find the chain. Then I started following up, and I only remember kicking for about just a few more seconds, and then that's when I remember sort of just seeing a light.
And started heading on up, and I have a little stronger, a little faster, so I was ahead of him a little bit, and I could start seeing the color change in the water. You just know the feel for when you're getting near the surface. And I, for some reason, one last look down to see what's going on if David's behind me, and he had stopped moving. So I had turned around and gone back down to see why he'd stopped, and he was just not responding to me. So I grabbed him around the waist and started kicking up to the surface. And I think somewhere between 5-10 seconds, and last thing I remember, next thing I know, I'm in the back of the boat.
So what did you think when you saw him floating on the surface?
I thought just the scariest thing in my life. I never thought death could be so close.
Robert! Stick back.
Nikki and Carson dragged Robert over the back of the boat, and then Carson got on the boat to help me bring David along the side of the boat because there was no space on the back, so we just had to pull him straight off of the side, just like dead weight over the side of the boat. Well, this was the scariest thing I've ever experienced in my life because they were both lifeless. No talking, just about two guys in your arms, dead, not breathing, their face purple, lips purple, eyes wide open.
Easy, man. Come on, Robert. Come on, Robert. Come on, Robert. Where's my freaking fin?
Here's the whole point about blackouts. You don't think it could happen to you? You better think again. So what can we do? Take a professional freedive class and be trained in CPR. Watch over each other and remember that a pool can be a very dangerous place too. Adjust your weight so you float up from 30 feet and don't hesitate to drop them if you get in trouble. Don't hyperventilate to excess. Avoid strenuous activity underwater and come up early if you exerted. Get plenty of rest between dives. Most important, dive with a buddy. Keep an eye on each other, one up, one down. After all, this is supposed to be fun.
Getting struck by a boat or a jet ski is one of the greatest dangers that we face in the water. Getting hit by a vessel can cause death or horrific injuries, and it probably happens more often than we think. Divers are difficult to see from a boat, especially if the water's getting choppy. So towing a float with a dive flag is essential for letting other waterway users know where you are, and if you're boat diving, display a clear, large dive flag from the boat. It's a good idea to avoid high traffic areas and keep your eyes and ears open. Keep in mind that sound travels 4 times faster under the water than it does in air, and this means that it's difficult to judge the distance and direction of an incoming boat, or even whether the boat's coming towards you or moving away from you. It's a good idea to lift your head out of the water every now and then to check for dangers. If a vessel's coming towards you, let your dive buddies know, keep an eye on the vessel, and try to signal its driver by yelling, waving your arms around, or with a signal mirror that's on your float.
Alright, today we're going to look at some of the gear that you use when you're spearfishing to keep you warm and safe. I'm wearing a wetsuit. This is a 3.5mm wetsuit, and I've only got the shorts on today because we're diving some nice warm water. So this will keep you nice and warm. It's important to match your wetsuit for the type of water that you're diving in so you don't get too hot, you don't get too cold. Now with a wetsuit, that makes you more buoyant, so you need something to get you down in the water. Here we've got a weight belt. This has got lead weights and a rubber belt. And I've got my dive knife here as well. Now the important thing about your weight belt is that it must have a quick release buckle. So this one buckles like this, and then there's just one quick pull like that and the belt will release. So if you get into trouble in the water, you can quickly release your weight belt and return to the surface without any problems. Of course, if you want to see underwater, you're going to need a mask and a snorkel. Well, you need a snorkel for breathing. If you want to see underwater, you need a mask. There's your snorkel to make it easy to breathe on the surface. Now with a spear gun. Spear guns can be a dangerous bit of equipment. They've got a sharp tip on them, so it's very important. Keep an old bit of spear gun rubber like this on your point. When I dive, I go into the water with the spear gun rubber on the tip. I tuck the bit of rubber into my sock, and then I can put it back on in the water before I hop back in the boat. These are the rubber. This is what powers your spear gun. We always have this unloaded anytime the gun's out of the water. Okay, this gun has a safety as well, so you can keep the safety. Do not rely on the gun safety to make the gun safe. The only safe gun is an unloaded gun. Alrighty, now we connect a float line to the gun and we run the float line to the float. Now it's important for other waterway users to be able to recognise that you're out there diving. So we use a nice bright dive flag and a bright float. It's appropriate for the occasions. Also, of course, keep your hands protected. Use a good pair of dive gloves. And keep your feet to stop them from chafing in your fins. Use a nice dive sock. I've got these great Dive R fins, which are great for getting you around the place.
The ocean has a diversity of marine life that can harm humans. Sharks, crocodiles and fish can bite, stingrays and jellyfish can sting, and some fish, sea snakes, blue-ring octopus and cone shells are venomous. But keep in mind that sharks and other marine creatures are a natural part of the marine environment, and if in doubt, don't touch them and get out of the water. The chances of a shark attack are very low, and the chances of a fatality occurring are about a 1 in a million. However, there are some simple tips to make swimming safer and reduce the risk of an incident involving sharks and humans. Leave the water immediately if you see a large shark. Never swim alone, at dawn, dusk, at night or in murky water. For more information on dangerous marine life and prevention, see the Surf Life Saving Association website.
We're just going to run through a few safety aspects of the boat before we leave to head out. It's a nice day, but you still want to go through it anyway. Now, your safety gear really needs to be stowed somewhere where you can get it quickly and without much fuss. There's no point having it jammed up under the front of the boat under seats. You want to have it in a bucket or something that's simple, just to lift the lid straight off and you're straight into your gear. So
minimum safety requirements for a vessel vary from state to state, but some of the most important stuff you need are an EPIRB, V-sheet, flare kit that's in date, mobile phone, fire extinguisher, waterproof torch, life jacket, and a bucket for bailing or for fighting fires.
what you really want is to have a set of tools that are specific to your needs, that'll fit your motor, fit your battery, fit your steering, anything that fits your boat. There's no point just having a screwdriver set. You really need something that's going to work just for your vessel. And if it's always kept in the same tub nice and dry, you always have it ready to work straight away. If you've got new guests on your boat, you want to give them a run through to show them how to use all the equipment. The main thing is you want to show them how to start the vessel, because in some situations they'll be going boaty for you. So it's just a matter of quickly running through. Say if you've got a dicky throttle or a dicky key, you shouldn't really be using it, but you still got to show the guys that are on the boat how to use it. So this is just a straightforward start. You've got your kill switch there, which catches a lot of people out. If it's only off just by, even if it's just sort of sitting there, the boat it won't get that start. So you want to always make sure that's on. And if you need to prime it, you're up with the prime. If not, just a simple key. That'll start the vessel. The other thing you want to check is that it's always pumping water. So if you need to lift the motor up a little bit to make sure the water's coming out of there, I've got a hose hooked onto mine for hot water because it gets a bit cold down here in Port Phillip during winter. So easy to start, easy in the gear. The other thing you want to go through is if it doesn't start, you've got to explain to them what it might be. It may be a loose battery terminal. So you've got the battery case at the rear of the vessel. I know all mine are tight because I do them before I come out to sea. Radio operation, simple, channel 16. All you've got to do is switch it on and you're ready to go. So different areas sometimes do not have good coverage on 16, so it's always good to check local conditions.
When anchoring your boat, you should take into account what effect the wind and the tide are going to have on the final resting place of your boat. If you're anchoring around a bommy, sit back and observe the behaviour of the swell before deciding on an anchoring point, and never anchor too close to the front of the bommy. The first diver in the water should swim over and check the anchor to make sure it's in a secure spot. If it's not, just reset it.
A couple of things we haven't talked about with boats. Before you go out, it's always wise to check in with the Coast Guard, log on, give them the vessel details, the number of passengers, how long you expect to be out for, and of course when you expect to return. And then when you do return, make sure that you log off with the Coast Guard to save them any anxiety of coming looking for you when you're already home. Another thing that you need to watch out for is bar crossings. Now, here in Port Phillip Bay, we don't have a river bar as such, but many of the coastal rivers have a bar, which is where a sandbank will build up at the entrance of the river. It's very important that you use the tides correctly to go out. On a run-out tide, the swell will kick up very sharply on the bar and can become very dangerous. So always try to time your crossing of a bar if you can for the last of the run-in tide on the top of the tide. And of course don't go out if the conditions are bad. It's always wise to get to a nice spot like a lookout and have a good look at the bar for 20 or 30 minutes. Have a look and see how it's behaving, especially if you're not familiar with that area.
Before you go for a dive, it's a good idea to make a plan and let all the divers know what the plan should be, and that way we can coordinate the boat and the divers and hopefully improve the safety of our dive. Now James isn't really familiar with diving in Port Phillip Bay, so I'm going to do the dive plan today. Now when we go out there, we're going to do a drift dive. The current's going to be coming inside the bay, so we're going to be drifting fairly quickly along the shore. When we get out there, we're just going to have a look around, make sure that there's no boats around, jet skis or any other dangers, see what's there. The boat's going to drop the divers in the water, 2 dives at a time.
Here we are, ready to hop in the water. It's important to check with the skipper. We're in neutral.
Yep, she's in neutral, out of gear.
A visual check, make sure the prop's not spinning. No boats around. Rightio, it's safe to hop in the water.
Now it's a diver's responsibility to stick together, keep an eye on each other, and also to keep an eye out for other dangers like boats coming, and also to make sure you don't get too far away from the dive boat. When we jump in, we're going to make sure the boat's up current of the divers, so that way if the boat doesn't start, then the divers can easily swim into the current while the boat will drift down towards them and we don't lose sight of the boat. If it's not windy today, so we don't have to take account of the wind, but if it was windy, then you've got to juggle, you've got to weigh off the effects of the current and the wind. And the best way to keep track of that is just to kill the engine with all the divers on board and just see which way the boat drifts. Now we've got to organise some hand signals. If you have any troubles, if you're in strife, you've got shark troubles, whatever, one hand out of the water, wave it around. If you just want to be picked up, wrap your line, your float line up on your gun, unloaded gun of course, and just hold that out of the water, and that way the boat knows to come and pick you up. And now the boat will approach you from up current, that way we don't have to swim towards the boat's just going to basically drift onto us. They're going to kill the outboard or put it in neutral, before we hop in. That way it'll keep our feet away from turning props and make sure we don't get our feet ripped off.
Alright, well, we've got a diver, got his gun up, ripcord wrap, so we'll move in to pick him up. You've got to be mindful of the other divers in the area at the time when you're picking someone up. We've got the wind pushing onto us now, so we're in neutral now. You can drift up. If you're coming a bit quick, you can give it a quick burst in reverse.
It's important when you pass your gun in to always pass it in butt first, and you notice the rubber's back on the tip to make sure it's safe.
Okay, so we've talked a bit about boat diving and some of the things you need to watch out for there. The other way that many people go spearfishing, and one of my favourite ways to go, is to jump in off the rocks, or rock hopping as we like to call it. Now there's a few different things you need to think about when you're rock hopping. You need to look at the conditions of the sea, you need to look at the tides, you need to look at any other traffic in the area like boats, jet skis or kite surfers. Make sure you factor them in to make sure it's safe. You need to check carefully your entrance point into the water and have a good exit point and a backup exit point for how to get out as conditions change. It's very important to check the swell before you go. If you have an increasing swell, you might have some serious trouble getting back out of the water in the washy rocks. Other things you need to be aware of: rock platforms can be very slippery with weed. They can have sharp barnacles and things like that. So have a good look around before you go walking out there to avoid any injury.
Diving underwater has some physiological effects on the human body that must be taken into consideration while diving. Apart from not being able to breathe, the most obvious of these are the effect of pressure on air spaces in the body, and because pressure increases with depth, the deeper you dive, the greater the effect. These air spaces include your sinuses and your middle ear. Of course, if you're scuba diving, your lungs are also important spaces requiring consideration. Equalisation is a term used for balancing the pressure on the body's air spaces with the pressure exerted on the body by the atmosphere and the water above you. The air spaces in the middle ears need to be equalised manually during descent, but they usually equalise naturally while you're coming back up. Without equalising that airspace, middle ear barotrauma or a squeeze can occur and can result in a ruptured eardrum, vertigo and nausea, not what you want underwater. There's a few methods that can be used to equalise ears, but the most common is to pinch the nostrils closed and trying to blow through them. Equalisation should be done frequently during descent from the time you leave the surface and well before you feel any pressure on your ears. If you can't equalise easily on the surface, don't dive. It's very important that if you're having trouble equalising while diving, stop your descent and stop diving. Colds, flus and allergies make it harder to equalise, and if you have any of those, don't dive. A reverse ear barotrauma or reverse squeeze can occur on ascent. This can happen if you successfully equalise during the descent, but a blockage prevents your ears from equalising naturally as you're going for the surface. This injury is especially common for people who use medication to clear congestion. To prevent reverse ear barotrauma, avoid diving with a cold, flu or ear infection, and don't dive while taking medication to treat the symptoms of a cold, flu or congestion. As always, consult your doctor if you're planning on diving on any medication. And you should also ensure that wetsuit hoods are not so tight that they block the ear canals. It's very important that if you can't equalise easily, don't try and force it. This can cause inner ear barotrauma that can result in serious temporary or permanent injury to your inner ear, including severe deafness, vertigo and nausea. To prevent inner ear barotraumas, avoid rapid descents and forceful equalisations. If you can't equalise easily, don't dive. Sinuses generally equalise naturally, but if you dive with a cold, flu, sinus infection or allergy, blockages can occur, potentially causing sinus barotrauma. Sinus barotrauma can be avoided by not diving with a cold, flu, sinus infection or allergy. It's pretty simple. If you're sick, don't dive.
Thanks for watching the SpearSafe DVD. I hope you picked up a few valuable tips from it to help make your spearfishing a bit safer. Just remember, always dive with a buddy, let someone know where you're going, and never ever push yourself. Special thanks to the Spear in the Menu guys for filming this production for us. It's been a fantastic assistance. And also thanks to the USFA and the AUF.